of this, Ned will explain to us where that can be found. I personally have about 20 minutes worth of material that I'm going to share with you, and then again we'll get to as many questions at the conclusion as we are able. If for any reason you don't get an answer to your question, we'll follow up through email as we did on the last webinar. Questions can be chatted in the dialog box, or you can raise your hand to speak once they open the phone line. And again, this is part 2 of a 2-part series. Okay, I thought it would be appropriate to just start with the last slide from the last presentation. And these are some of the things that we spent a little time talking about. And you'll notice that the very last item is the International Trade Data System. That was kind of the segue into this second part of the series. These other items, again, were well covered during that first series. So if you have a moment and weren't a part of that first webinar, please feel free to not only look at the deck, but I do think there's a recording of it out there somewhere that Ned will guide you to. Okay, so a new acronym is born, and I like to say that we live in the alphabet soup of acronyms in the industry that we're in. The government is awash in them, and we've got a new one to, again, add to our repertoire, and that's ITDS. You're going to be seeing a lot about ITDS in the coming months and years as they get ready to roll it out. So part of this is to familiarize you with that new acronym. And I should point out that this slide deck will also be made available. In fact, I've already got a couple of requests ahead of today's webinar for this second deck. This is a link, an actual link to the ITDS website. It's out there primarily for other government agencies to use, but it would behoove you as a member of the trade community to also look at that website. So if you get a copy of this deck, you should be able to go right to this link where my cursor is now and click on that, and it'll take you to the ITDS website. Of course, you can also Google it or put in itds.gov as I think the address of that site. But what is ITDS? Well, it's going to be a single window or portal into and out of the federal government, the U.S. government. And for many of us, that's a good thing. This has really been on the drawing board since, I want to say, early 2000, but I think it was even conceptualized in the late 90s by a number of people in the federal government. And it's really being driven by Treasury, by the Treasury Department. There is an ITDS Board of Directors, and that's being chaired by a gentleman named Tim Scud, and he is the Assistant Secretary of the Treasury for Tariff and Trade. And Tim has done a yeoman's job in getting ITDS not only moved from a concept to reality, but pulling in the other partnering government agencies that need to be a part of this endeavor. So, again, it's being driven by Treasury and CBP, and in February of this year, President Obama signed an executive order mandating that all federal agencies that regulate or otherwise have oversight on commercial trade of foreign origin must become or join the ITDS initiative. And with that executive order, he's mandated that ITDS be completed and rolled out by the end of 2016. So we've got about two and a half years left before ITDS will become a reality. And basically what it does is it mandates that all PGA, and that's another change really of acronyms. Us old codgers in the business used to call it OGA, other government agencies. It's now called PGA. It's a more politically correct term for partnering government agencies. But all, and there could be up to 40 federal agencies involved in regulating foreign trade. All agencies are now mandated to be ITDS compliant no later than December 2016. CBP's ACE system will be really the primary conduit for ITDS. So that'll be the system that they use to accept and then transfer back all of the message sets related to an international transaction. It will facilitate all necessary message sets required for global trade. So no longer will we have these disparate websites that have been set up perhaps like by Fish and Wildlife. Today, if you have something that's controlled or regulated by Fish and Wildlife, you can't send the necessary declaration or certificate through the current ACE or ABI platform that CBP maintains. You have to go to a separate FWS, Fish and Wildlife Service website, and complete the information. The big change coming, of course, is that ITDS mandates that Fish and Wildlife now come to the table and integrate that message set, certificate, or declaration into the ITDS system. So it will be, again, ACE will be the primary conduit, and then we'll gate off messages to the appropriate federal agencies within the federal government as they get that rolled out. So I threw this in there because this is a big change. This is the world that we used to live in. And I cut my teeth in this business as a customs broker, and I've walked into many brokerage offices since then that look almost like this. But more and more, this is becoming our world. We're getting into a paperless, totally paperless environment. And we've worked with a number of clients over the years who are making that leap of faith from moving from a paper-based system to a paperless system. And if you're not there yet, I can only encourage you to get there as quickly as your IT and company resources allow. But today, most of us, instead of, again, issuing paper POs, we do everything electronically. Those POs go out in an electronic or EDI format, and then through EDI we get other message sets such as the advanced ship notice, and we're now, of course, getting documents either, again, through an EDI message set, or at a bare minimum, they're being scanned and digitized and then sent to us in PDF files. So we're, again, moving away from paper into this electronic environment, and the sooner that you can get your company and your global or trade compliance program into a totally electronic world, the better off you'll be. Now, I say that, but be careful. It's the old garbage in, garbage out. If the data lacks integrity, you're not going to do yourself any favors. So one of the first projects that a lot of companies have to face is getting rid of either erroneous data or redundant data within their systems. You've got to make sure that those systems, because those are now, after all, your business records, that those systems have good quality data that can be relied on to make your customs and other declarations. So what will happen when ITDS does get stood up in its entirety in 2016? Well, that gives customs the ability then to begin sharing data perhaps with other customs administrations. And I do honestly think that that's where this is all headed. The World Customs Organization, or the WCO, which is based in Brussels, Belgium, is leading the charge among their 178 member countries and among other countries' customs administrations to get data not only for the import but for exports as well. And ITDS will give the U.S. that ability to share trade data then with other customs administrations. And that's really where a lot of this is headed. So when you think about it, it gets us back to the Big Brother concept. Yes, Big Brother is definitely watching now. And in addition to the U.S. CBP having extraordinarily new data mining capabilities, when the U.S. begins to share trade data with other customs administrations, this will give those customs administrations the ability to audit or have an electronic data trail on every transaction. So, for example, when an export is made from China, that turns into an import here in the U.S. Both the Chinese Customs Administration and the U.S. will have the ability to compare what the exporter in China declared to Chinese customs for tax purposes and exportation purposes. They'll have the ability to compare that value, for example, to the value that was then declared by the U.S. importer bringing the goods into the country. And for some in the trade community, that's a scary prospect. So this is the WCO 21st Century Customs Model, and you'll notice that number 1 out of their top 10 is globally networking all customs administrations that are members of the WCO. And then, of course, it's moving on to better coordinated border management and intelligence-driven risk and other things. But the number 1 goal is to get them all networked globally so they have the ability to share that trade data. So for those that know me, I'm a huge fan of auditing. And that brings us around to the necessity, really, for companies that are engaged in either importing or exporting to audit the work product that's being given to them by their brokers and forwarders for errors. I can't tell you how often or how many companies we walk into on a consulting project where one of the first questions I'll ask is, do you today currently audit at least a minimal portion of your packets, your entry packets that you receive from your broker? Some are very good about that. They have a 100% audit requirement. In fact, some have built electronic audit capabilities into their processes, but just as many more, if not more, tell me, no, we don't have time. We're crunched for resources, and we simply don't have time to sit down and audit those. But for those companies, I would tell you, you should make time. You really need to get out there and look at the declarations and certifications that are being represented about your imports to the federal government. And while you may have implicit faith and trust in the broker that's doing your work for you today, mistakes happen, and you can't abdicate your responsibility or liability for those mistakes. If a broker makes a mistake on your behalf, that's your mistake, and you own it, and you're obligated by the standards of reasonable care, again, to have processes and controls in place where you can identify those mistakes and then remedy them not only for today, but more importantly for the future. So just a note there, if you're not auditing, I highly encourage you to think about getting an audit protocol set up. And at a bare minimum, that may be an opportunity for you to outsource such a capability to a third party. But you should have a second or third set of eyes put on the trade data that you're sending through to the U.S. government. So with that, that's the ITDS system. I'm sure there's tons of questions. As I said, we'll have the ability to answer some of those questions at the end of today's presentation, and we'll go ahead and make this deck available to you. And feel free to, again, either chat your question or raise your hand, and either Ned or Greg will call on you. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ned Blenick, and he's going to take you through the rest of the presentation. Thanks for your time. Ned, you may be on mute, but we can't hear you.
I am sorry. Thank you, Mike. Welcome, everybody. And
you were sounding good, weren't you, too, Ned?
Yeah, well, I always sound better in mute. I'm sure that there's going to be lots of churn around the information that Mike has just presented. And there is no doubt that the government agencies of all stripes have the ability today to capture incredible amounts of personal and business information which can be used for positive and negative purposes. From the perspective of the importer, which is what I'm going to focus on, there should be concern with what is going on at CBP and PGAs to capture, integrate, and mine these incredibly large amounts of data. Those importers that ignore the shifts in the importer-CBP-PGA relationship balance will be the least prepared for the fallout. And this is where the focus on automation, from our perspective, really has a way of addressing or redressing this balance to make sure that the importer has the tools available to them to respond to the changing environment that CBP and the PGAs operate in. So this leads me to the focus of my short presentation, which is how the importer through automation can address and to a great extent neutralize the effects of big government and big data. Probably the most important way to affect this is to listen to what Mike has said today and in his previous webinar, and that is that it is critically important for the importer to own and manage the entire import supply chain, and that CBP is gaining traction to make enforcement more pervasive. From a customs compliance perspective, it means having clear oversight of all aspects of an import shipment through its import processes. It means managing the CBP and PGAs either directly or through your traditional customs broker. This fundamental principle of import compliance and importer responsibility has not changed over time. However, what is changing is that automation and big data are increasing the ability of CBP and PGAs to hold the importer accountable. The fallout is that the traditional customs broker role will provide less and less of a buffer for reasonable care between the importer and the PGAs. And that means that the importer is more and more responsible for managing their organization related to the regulatory and enforcement regimes. As Mike mentioned, the CBP and PGAs are gaining access to and developing better capability to mine and interpret data. They will be developing more comprehensive profiles of the actors in the import process, namely the carriers, the customs brokers, and importers, as well as your suppliers. And the outcome will be that CBP and the PGAs will be able to pursue more targeted reviews of all participants and focus on those organizations that are least compliant. So from an importer's perspective, let me just... Can people see my screen? Or is it blank?
It's blank.
Click
right
it
now.
again, Ned.
Yeah, just click it again.
Yeah, I'm just, okay, let's just see where we are. No, when I go to, that's interesting.
Just go down and press forward on the next slide.
Yeah, no, I did that, Greg. Okay, so let's, can you see that?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll work from here. Okay, so from an importer perspective, the issue is how does it know that your organization is effectively and efficiently able to withstand the increased scrutiny of CBP and PGAs? Fortunately for the importer, there are tools today that allows you to automate the import compliance process so that you have more visibility into and control over the entire import supply chain. And you're able to do this with fewer resources but better systems. And this is true whether you use a traditional customs broker or you decide to in-house it and file directly. The benefit of automating all of this is that, and the implications are that automation helps you rebalance this importer CBP relationship and allows you to gain control over data and respond to CBP and the PGA's incursion into your business so that when they are demanding information, it's readily available. As Mike said, paper-based systems are cumbersome. They don't allow you to react quickly and to respond effectively. And automation is going to enable the importer to take control of the import compliance regime from everything from the management of HTS codes in a comprehensive database-driven environment to the preparation of the ISF or the entries, and to ensure that the filing prior to being submitted has been audited by a system and through direct visual eyes. And it will enable the importer to ensure that when they are communicating information to customs, it is more accurate and has been vetted internally. It'll allow the importer to direct or to effectively communicate with the CBP and PGAs because they'll have the information in a context that is meaningful and understandable by both parties. Importantly, it provides strong process control, and everybody knows that it is important that the environment be managed internally and that the processes that you have in place line up with your procedures. And by automating systems, there is a definite control over processes so that they are repeatable activities that everyone can learn and can manage in a centralized way, and it really takes away from a more ad hoc approach to customs compliance and control. And finally, it provides the importer with the tools to reduce costs and increase capabilities. Automation, one of the things that we constantly hear from people is that by automating the system, it's going to require either an LCB or additional personnel. The reality is that automation really reduces the number of hours, man hours, women hours required to manage the process because information is now being aggregated within systems and being controlled and visible and transparent. So we have that capability. So there are benefits and significant benefits to automating the import compliance processes, and these are listed below. I've mentioned them, I've alluded to some of them. The standardization of activity and procedure, very important. The automation increases corporate knowledge and capability, and it reduces the need for individual memory. And one of the major challenges for organizations is institutional memory, and particularly in a customs environment where knowledge resides with the individuals for the most part and their experiences. Through automation, the organization is able to start managing information in such a way that the organization can have the knowledge easily affecting them and gain it and pass it on to other individuals within the organization. It becomes transparent. It allows for, and we'll demonstrate this in the very near future, it allows for the organization to automate the ISF and the entries and to prepare them in such a way that they can be viewed in advance of entry or being sent down to the customs broker if you continue on in a traditional way. It allows you to then control what goes and what interfaces to customs. It allows that pre and post audit capability, as I mentioned, and it allows for the quick retrieval of information when it is needed. So traceability within the system, within a customs compliance system, is now made evident to everyone. It's easily retrieved, and it's available on demand. Automation supports comprehensive customs and OGA track and trace. Certainly being able to know who touched what when is very, very important within a compliance system. And through automation, there is an audit trail that can be built up so that anyone who is logged into the system can be, and working on a file, can be seen, and the ability to control access and to know who did what when becomes very apparent. Number 9, it allows the importer to manage its customs broker more effectively or self-file. Again, because you're able, the system is able to provide the entries in a format that are editable and visible and auditable. The importer can either manage very quickly and very easily their customs broker by sending them the correct information as to what is necessary to file on their behalf, a critical element in managing the broker and exercising reasonable care. Or if they're comfortable with what they're sending, they can actually self-file, and that's a very easy process out of the automation. It really is just the push of a button. And finally, automation allows the importer to dramatically reduce its import compliance operational costs. As with most automation tools, whether it's a word processing or Excel spreadsheet, or it's an integrated system, automation allows you to do more with less because the system itself is doing a lot of the work. So from that perspective, automation truly has many benefits, both from a cost perspective, but most importantly from a transparency and a workflow and systems perspective. So what I would like to do now is take a look at what this environment looks like and how it lays out. So we have a flow that outlines for you how an automated system can take information from various players within the environment in a very simple, easy to update way, integrate the information within the environment, within its environment, so that it can be presented to the user for review, for comprehension, so that it can guide the user through the process, as well as alert the user to the effectiveness of information coming into the system or the absence of information. And then it can generate the entries in a format that is contextualized and understandable. And then it allows you to determine how you want to interface with customs, either directly through self-filing or through your broker. So what we have in these various lanes are the supplier, which will receive the purchase orders and do the execution of the order, the enterprise system, which is the system of record, and then we have the supply or the automated customs compliance environment, which allows for the integration, aggregation of the information from the various players into a format that then allows it to generate information in an understandable and readable way. And then it provides you with the ability to either self-file or to send off a notification to your customs broker. So the integration components are really touch points between the client ERP system and the third parties that are involved in executing the shipment, namely your suppliers, your freight forwarders, the carriers, the people who own the content from the execution perspective. So within an automated system, from a customs compliance perspective, the information that is required is the ability to capture things like account records, product records, and the associated either HTS codes. And to be able to manage those simply and easily within the environment. Much of this information will be held within the system of record, the ERP system, and it can be easily uploaded into the automated system either through tight integration or in certain instances, in the case of our environment, through simple flat files or Excel spreadsheet information. And that information can be synchronized with the client ERP system on a time basis so that it will be uploaded and then managed within the environment so that it can be used against the detail coming from the execution, the operations environment. So, and once that is done, it's also possible for auditing purposes in terms of the values of the product, the items, the quantities, the value, the terms, conditions of the sale. PO detail can be easily imported into the environment as well if the ERP system can manage it. And once we get into the execution stage, the details of the shipment can be sent from the supplier or the freight forwarder or the carrier in a simple Excel upload or EDI format. So depending on the environment that the importer is operating in, the size of the importer, the system should be able to accommodate either very formal EDI messaging or XML messaging, or the less formal but powerful Excel uploads. And that information then gets aggregated into a customs file within the environment. And once it's in that environment, the system can then manage the entry process. And what the automation allows for is the ability to have views of information in such a way that ISF details can be monitored so that you can actually file and know whether the ISF is filed on your behalf, or you can file it. And similarly, prepare the entry, the 3461 or 7501 entry, and OGA entries for the entry purposes. And as Mike said, as the PGAs become more integrated into the entire CBP global framework, this ability to integrate and to file everything automatically becomes more important and centralized. So once that information is there, the entries can be created and they can be filed directly with customs through a system like TRG, which is a self-filing system, or it can go to your, a broker notification can be created and sent directly to the customs broker with all of the details associated with it. So what we'll do at this moment is we'll go take a look at an entry process, what an automated system looks like, recognizing that if I just go back to my screen, that this environment is all happening behind the screen. You don't see most of it, and basically what you're going to be able to see is how the information is displayed once it has been captured in the system, either through the Excel templates, the EDI messaging, or where necessary manual updates, but very little manual updating should be necessary. But you're going to see the environment and we're going to process an entry. So where I'm going to go to is the environment that represents automation. This is the third wave environment. Just to set the framework for it, it is a web-based environment. So it can be accessed 24/7 anywhere. It's hosted either externally in the cloud, in secure facilities, or it can be hosted behind the client's firewall. And it allows for the information, the supporting detail, to be captured, as I mentioned, in terms of the product detail, the account detail, the HTS codes, the OGA profiles. All of that is managed in the tables and records at the database level, which means that once it's entered into the system, it is available for retrieval without having to have user decision-making or visibility or entry at the time of preparation. We have dashboards which can support and provide information into what is happening. So there are alerts that would let us know, for instance, whether the ISF details have been sent to us in advance for filing purposes. It allows us to understand whether the supplier, if they're filing on behalf of the importer, has actually executed. But we have alerting messages at various levels that can be seen. We have the ability to take a look at what is the entry activity, what is the statuses of those entries as they go through. This information can come directly, if you're self-filing, would be integrated into the ABI package, and the status is being fed back to you so that at the dashboard level you'd be able to see what's happening at any point in time. And you can see various activities in terms of how your products, whether your products are classified or unclassified, the activities at the ports of entry. If you're using multiple ports of entry, the system can provide you with visibility into what action is taking place at those ports of entry. If you have multiple chapters that you're clearing goods under, you can create your own HTS codes, code records, and through simple drill down you can get to the details of a chapter and the products within the chapter and see what activity is taking place. So what we are going to do at the moment is we're going to go to an entry. We're going to take a look at what does it take to self-file and see how simple that process is. So I'm going to click on a file that I've brought up, and as I said, within the third wave environment we are presenting information contextually so that it is easy to read, easy to view, and understand. And as I mentioned, we have the history of audit for who touched what when, and we can always have traceability. So what we've created here, and the system has created from the information that is being provided from the database or from our suppliers, is an entry related to some furniture that we're importing. And as part of the information, we aggregate the information at the container or shipment level, and we can capture the header information and all of the details as who the importer is, stuffer, consolidator, consignee, necessary information for the entry purposes or the management. We can see the equipment, and we can drill down to see what that equipment looks like, what are all the details in terms of bill of lading information, the way the container is packed, and other information. We can see country of export detail, import detail, the cities, ports of lading, ports of unlading, ports of entry. All of that information can be managed within the environment. And then what we have down here is the line item detail, obviously the values, the weights and measures, the tariffs, the supplier. And once we have that, we would finalize the equipment. Once we're comfortable with what we see, and you can see that we get a button that says Generate ISF. So if we're content that the information that we have at this point is correct, what we can do is generate the ISF, and it's a click of the button. We click the button, and it's going to bring up the ISF entry screen. And we can see here that we have the entry basically prepared by the system. We can review it, audit it online. We can take a look at the container details. If there's multiple containers, they would be listed. Similarly, bill of lading detail, and we can edit the bill of lading detail, take a look at the products, make sure that the information is right. And if we're comfortable with it, we would hit complete. And the system will generate now the file. It'll ask me if I want to review the file. I could review it again. And if I'm comfortable with it, it's now going to ask me to submit the entry. Let me just see. Oh, sorry. It should allow, it should allow me to submit the entry, and I would get back from the TRG system the customs entry number at this point. After that entry is submitted, I should be able to generate, I would go to generate the customs file. The system will pull up and execute the entry for me. I put in some dates just to make sure my dates are correct. The freight rate. I have to pick a firm's code from the data tables. I enter it, I create my entry. Again, I can review my items. I can take a look at each individual item on the system. If I have to make changes or review any information at this point, I can do it. If I have anti-dumping information, we can add it at the line item level at this point. Similarly, we can make any adjustments or fees. If the system or if the item had a PGA associated with it, the PGA profile would come up, and when I'm content, I would hit complete. And the system will then generate for me, again, the entry format. And it's going to look like this. And I would be able to review it, again, taking a look at the items, the HTS codes, the values for duty, making sure that they're correct. At this point, I can do two things. I can view the 7501 entry, pull it up. The system has generated all of this information based on the detail. We can review it this way. We can aggregate lines if we choose. We can break it down, and we can break all the costs down at the line level for analysis in the future, so we can see everything. The MPF and HMF details, the broker fees, all the other fees are associated with it. The entry can be reviewed this way. And if we're comfortable with it, there are two things we can do now. We can finalize it. And if we finalize it, we have two options. We can, at that point, review it. And we can either submit it directly to customs through the TRG process. And it's being submitted. And what you get back is the entry number from customs. And momentarily, we get back a status. And depending on the status within the ABI environment, in this case TRG, it would be executed. However, if you wanted to use a broker, you could then generate a broker advice, and you'd be able to manage that process off a system and transmit this down to your broker in either hard copy with documentation or over the web or over email or other interactions to get to the broker. But again, what you're able to do now is manage your broker at a very detailed level, and for purposes of future auditing, the system will then be able to provide you with the values of the entry and the way the entry should be made. So that is what automation can do. It provides, again, the framework for capturing information very quickly, from your third parties. It can all be set up so that you are more or less benign except for the oversight perspective. And you're able to then generate both your ISF, your customs entries, your PGA filings off of system. And from that perspective, at that moment, we've executed the environment, or we've executed a transaction, and automation truly then provides you with the ability to execute, manage the process, and execute the final stage, which is the entry, which is ultimately a very simple process through automation. So that brings us to the end of our session. If you have any questions, I don't know, let me just see if I can open it up and see. Greg, can you see any questions at this point, or?
I cannot see the chatted messages, Ned. You're going to have to take a look at that yourself. While you're looking for any questions some of the people may have today, let's also note that as you look at automation and you're thinking about, wow, how do I get my hands around this? We've got people who are on here everywhere from a couple of hundred entries to several thousands and many thousands of entries. And as you look at automation in that kind of an environment, you may not want to have it all happen at once. There's what we call perhaps a staged process here that you could engage in. And that would be, if you want to ultimately be a self-filer, you can certainly do that as quickly as you want. But if you want to use the third wave system to forward the automated entry and ISF information to TRG, we also will operate as a customs brokerage and file those entries in the traditional way. Now, what's good about that is two things. The first thing is it's a dramatically lower cost than probably what you're paying today, because we've automated the processes and we're more providing a review function and then transmission. But it also allows you to become a lot more of a part of the process, of a part of the auditing, get involved in some of these automated positives that we're trying to throw out there now, and then begin to self-file at a measured pace, or at a pace that you and your staff and your resources allow. So, so a couple of different approaches. You don't have to think of it as an all or none. You can stage this and do it really in any way you want. We can do some, you can do some, you can do all, we can do all of the above work. So do you have any questions up there, Ned?
Yes, we have a few, Greg. One of the questions was with respect to, does third wave replace TRG as a system?
Yeah, no, that's always a good question that we get. What we are complementary systems. Third wave is designed as a global commerce management system, and you've kind of seen it in action, if you will, with Ned today. And what it does is it goes and it grabs all the data that you have in your ERP and goes out and finds the data that you don't. And once it has it, it creates both the ISF and the customs files that then flow through our ABI ACS system. Well, we're also ACE as well. So, so you've got the automation portion that's done by third wave. You've got the, for lack of a better term, the brokerage portion that's done by us, because we have a licensed brokerage. We've got licensed brokers on hand, and you want to have that expertise when you're getting involved in that. So that's a good question. Thank you.
The question, there was a question obviously on, are we recording the presentation? The answer is yes. And will it be available both from a hard copy or from the deck will be made available? If you would like a copy, you can either contact Mike, myself, or Greg, and we can get out a copy of the deck to you. We are also looking to provide this up on a YouTube. And if you would like to have a copy or you'd like to have access to the YouTube presentation when it's up, if you would let us know, we can get that out to you in the future. There are some questions in terms of going paperless, and do you need to get special permission from Customs in order to go paperless? Greg, I don't know if you would like to be able to answer that.
Well, right now, and Mike can probably even answer this more specifically, but the customs regs say you must keep your customs data in the manner that it's received. So if you receive your customs information electronically, as we most do now, you can save it that way, and you are in compliance. If you kind of an old-fashioned create paper, on the brokerage side, we create paper folders for each of our files. So that is, that's because we are copying information. We are gathering a bunch of documents and putting them together in one file. Mike, how would you best answer that as far as an importer of record maintaining their documentation per customs regs?
Well, a lot of it, Greg, is their own personal preferences, obviously, and of course how it comes to you. If today you are getting your files scanned or imaged somewhere and sent to you by email, that's electronic technically. And again, as Greg said, you're obligated then to keep those electronic records and make them retrievable for up to 5 years. No less than 5 years. If you're getting paper or a combination of both, the best practice, of course, today is to eliminate as much paper as possible. So again, there's a big movement towards going totally electronic. That is having the capability to issue your PO electronically, and then everything is electronic after that. Up to and including the data or invoices, commercial invoices, that are coming back from that foreign supplier or vendor. So again, if you're getting a combination of both, paper and electronic, that's the way you have to keep it until you change or are successful in changing those paper vendors over to electronic formats. Or converting them yourself. Some importers are also requesting that their freight forwarders provide that function overseas. So when they receive vendor documents in a paper format, they're requesting or requiring those freight forwarders to scan or image the documents, turning them into an Adobe or PDF file at that time. And going back to permission, when electronic record keeping first started, you had to request a waiver from CBP. You had to send them a letter in no real particular format other than outlining the system and the methodology you're using to store your records and guaranteeing them that you'd have the ability to retrieve them. You used to have to send a letter to in the beginning it was Miami, and then I think they actually moved it up the coast to, I think it's Charleston that processes that electronic record keeping waivers now. But as Greg noted, you have to keep them in the condition in which they were received. So you only would have to write that letter now requesting a waiver if you are receiving them in paper and then proposing to scan them yourselves or image them yourselves into a document retrieval system. If you were making that change, you should, just to be safe, get the address and send a request for one of those waivers. But CBP recognizes that times have changed. They themselves support and embrace electronics, and as long as you have great confidence and are comfortable that you can retrieve them and you're not going to have a catastrophic data crash or loss of data, it's a good thing, and they support that. So I hope I've I've rumbled on long enough, but I hope I've answered that person's question.
We probably have time for one more before we hit the top of the hour, Ned. Do we have one more one we can hit?
We have many more, but one more I think that has been asked several times, particularly with reference to self-filing. It was, do you need to be a licensed customs broker or do you need a licensed customs broker on your staff in order to be a self-filer?
Well, the answer to that is no, the good news. ISF, of course, is not customs business, so not only do you not have to be licensed or be a brokerage to do it, you can actually do it for other people. So if you are a multinational out there with a lot of different subsidiaries, you could centralize your ISF filing without any problem at all. When you look at the customs entry, of course, that is customs business, but every single IOR has and has always had the ability and the right to file their own entries. Now you've got to obtain your own filer code. You have to obtain an ACH payer code because you'll be paying your duties and fees directly to customs. But yep, you do not have to have brokers on staff, and that's really why we've beefed up our customer service so that, quote, those people, those professionals involved in importation and logistics at your company who are very knowledgeable in what you do and how you do it and how you have done it, the perfect candidates to self-file. But you don't have to have a license to do it. If you do run into issues and questions that occur over the normal entry process, you can call us. And we have customer service that is free of charge. It's part of the program, and it's available per phone as well as per email. So good question. It's probably a great one to end here. We're just at 1 o'clock now. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the rest of our question sets here, and we're going to answer them out to you, and we're going to create a Q&A that's going to be part of the slide deck. And but if anyone additionally has questions of the three of us, please send them to us, and we will add that to our list, and we'll get those answered because that's all part of the full circle here. So we appreciate everyone's time today, and we will look forward to getting this information out to you shortly. Thank you again for attending.